the Green Defenders Network. As you've just heard, we're recording, so please leave the video off if you prefer not to be seen. We'd also ask you to leave your microphones off unless and until you're speaking. Just helps with background noise. So I'm Ian Ashman. I'm a trustee of CPRE.
I mean, I love festivals. I think it's great playing music.
Hello, we've got somebody on audio. If you could turn it off, please.
Well, they do it every year. Yeah. It's terrible. It hasn't grown back since last year, and it just about starts to come back through again. And then they do.
Hello. Do we? Thank you. So I'm Ian Ashman. I'm trustee of CPRE, and I'm chairing the meeting today. As with previous meetings, we've got a great attendance, over 30 people joining us. We've got a combination of a couple of speakers on a specific topic. This time round, it's about campaigns to save playing fields. We'll have some updates from the staff team from CPRE and also from on Wimbledon Park. As ever, we'll have a session at the end which invites people to make contributions themselves. If you want to ask a question, please can you put up a virtual hand? And if you want to be making a contribution at the end, it would be helpful if you could use the chat to just post up which organisation you're from if you want to do an update. We'll also be inviting people at the end to give us ideas for future meetings. So again, have your thinking caps on. So I'm going to move on then to hear from our speakers. And what we're going to do is we'll have the presentations from the two speakers and then we'll take questions. So as mentioned, please put your hands up if you want to ask questions. So let's start with our first speaker. We have Andy McRae from the Oakfield Sports Campaign. And then we're followed by Aisha, and we'll introduce her later on. So, Belonians campaign at Oakfield, over to you.
I thought I'd done that. Can you hear me now? Thank you. Right. So Belonians at Oakfield. We've been driving this for about 5 years. Is that background noise or someone asking me a question? Okay, I'll just carry on until I hear. So first of all, let me just tell you a bit more about Belonians as a football club. We were established in 1936, originally from Bill Grammar School in Ilford, and the old boys playing football. I confess I have very little knowledge of the pre-war era or anything prior to 1960. It is a grassroots club. All the players are amateur, and it is run solely by volunteers. That now is round about 600 people with approximately 70 volunteers. We've been based in the London Borough of Redbridge the whole time, at a couple of sites, originally using park playing fields, but we actually moved onto Oakfield originally as tenants of Redbridge Sports Centre in 2002. As you'll learn more about the Oakfield site, we were actually on the same playing field as the Jack Carter Pavilion, which was being operated by Frentford Club, so a youth club in the borough. The move to Oakfield enabled us to really kickstart and grow our youth section with youth football in line with what the FA were promoting. We started then with 2 teams, and while our open age teams were doing okay, we were starting to see the decline in adult football as a general trend in football. With our youth section, gradually, organically, we've grown to now operate 28 youth teams across the full range, from under 7 to under 18s. And we have development groups at under 5 and under 6. We're also part of the FA scheme on the female path, which we operate squad girls and wildcat sessions every Saturday. And we also operate a community session free of charge for anybody who actually wants to play football but hasn't got a team or isn't involved in any organised football at all. That has enabled us to maintain and grow our adult section, the senior section. We now see that over 50% of our players that play in our open age at some point in their past played in our youth teams. So there is a natural progression, and they progress even further down the line that they even play veterans football. And so we're keeping people engaged in sport right through into their 30s, 40s, 50s, and some of them even into their 60s. Frenford, we originally leased the site from, didn't lease, we were tenants of Frenford originally from 2012, when the Frenford clubs moved premises, all part of the London Olympics, and operating grants there. They combined their two centres to one, and we took on the Jack Carter Pavilion. We took on as being their tenants, their sole tenants for football, and became then a registered charity in 2020 when we learned that they were going to cease, gave notice to Redbridge of ceasing their agreement there for us to take it on. We've also been England Football Accredited, which is basically a kite mark for football, that we do all the right things around safeguarding, have for all emergency aid, and all our coaches are suitably qualified. So as you can see, over time, we've grown very organically, but we are now quite a large club. So, and we're very pleased to be part of the Oakfield site. So where is Oakfield? If you're not sure of your London geography, Redbridge is up here in the top left in northeast London, southwest Essex if you're coming from the other direction. And then within the London Borough of Redbridge, Oakfield is this piece of ground here, just to the left of the central line running between Fairlop and Hainault. You can see it from the train as you pass by. And then within the site itself, which is reasonably complex, there are three major entities. You've got Old Parkonians operating both football and a cricket club. You've got Redbridge Sports Centre, predominantly racket sports, but obviously offering lots of other activities as well. There you can see on this map they've got two hockey astroturfs, and then Redbridge Sports Centre also operate 3 football pitches at the back here, and then you've got ourselves at Jack Carter Pavilion with the pavilion here and provision of football pitches and 2 cricket squares that we maintain and hire out as well during the summer months. So that gives you an idea. The site is quite complex, but the principal users work together. And when it came under threat, originally back in, Chris, I know it was before, sometime around about 2000 and early 2000s, I think. So you have to understand the history of the site. It first come under threat from the council at the time, led by the Conservative Party, that they wished to build houses on. That created the Save Oakfield Society, which was led by Dr. Chris Nutt and still is today. And that was defeated. But lo and behold, the council are not to be deterred. and as part of the local plan for 2016 to 2030, they proposed a number of greenfield sites in the borough earmarked for housing, including Oakfield, which was earmarked for over 800 houses. An excellent campaign that was organised by SOS, led by Chris Nutt, defeated that when it came up before the planning inspectorate. And so we thought, hopefully our future as a playing field was safe for grassroots sport. When Belonians moved into Jack Carter Pavilion in 2020, we've been working with Frentford and the council to hopefully have a seamless transition. And although it was COVID times, they wrote to us and asked us to look after the place and post-COVID open lease negotiations with us. They were moved at what I would call glacial speed. And in approximately a year's time, May 2021, we got a phone call saying that the council had decided to cease lease negotiations with us because they wanted to offer the ground to West Ham United for their academy. It all went, we wrote to them at the time. Things generally went fairly quiet for the best part of a year, until such point that the council actually advertised in the local van with an S123 notice, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, for disposal of open land, which was the Jack Carter Pavilion and playing fields, which is the picture you can see on the playing fields we have on the screen.
Andy, you've got about 5 minutes now.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. From that decision, from that we prepared our own submission and submitted it. Lo and behold, the council come up with the decision that they would open lease negotiations with West Ham. This really kick-started us and our campaign, because we had recognised the way things had been approached looked like it was a fait accompli, and they were looking to actually give this to West Ham come what may. There is a lot of history you have to understand of the site, and again, we're thankful for SOS and everything, so we've actually got a lot of background and information and help in how to run campaigns. The people you really have to influence, and you have to have different strands to your campaign. Politicians being a probably obvious one, both local and national. And in our case here in Ilford North, where the club is based, the MP is Wes Streeting, which makes it quite an interesting dynamic. The media, how much publicity coverage can you get? In our case, we went to a firm to help us with the media side of things. That it does come at a cost, so you have to know if you can afford that. It did make a big difference. It gave us coverage with the BBC local news coming down on Saturday morning, interviewing some of the children. We did podcasts for various West Ham fan groups across YouTube. We did interviews to local radio, good coverage in the press in both the local papers and the Evening Standard. So this all helps build pressure onto the politicians, the decision makers. You also then, previously through that campaign in 2016, a stakeholder group had been set up, and then we were able to utilise that stakeholder group again with representation from both the county FAs, in our case this is Essex FA and the Amateur Football Alliance, Essex Cricket, yourselves as CPRE, Essex Playing Field, Sport England. There's so much knowledge and information there that really can help, and also the weight that these organisations can lend to your campaign. Last but not least, and of course the thing that makes a big difference is the law, and unless you have the legal advice and people who can understand the legal jargon, which certainly from the layman's perspective gets very technical and very detailed. So in our case, we are extremely grateful to the Public Information Law Centre, the work they did. We are fortunate on our board of trustees to have somebody who is a lawyer and that can guide us and help us. And eventually we sought barrister advice as well. Where that led us to is that we actually, eventually after all our letters to the council, in December 2023, we sent the council a letter before claim asking them to reply to us by 5 p.m. on the 29th of December 2023. At 3 p.m. on the 29th of December, we received our legal people received an email informing us that the council had decided to revoke their decision to open lease negotiations with West Ham whilst they undertook legal advice. It then went silent and we didn't make any moves. And then in September, we just politely asked what is happening, because obviously we want to get our future sorted out, because some of us are not getting any younger and we need to get the club into a stable position where we can move things on. So since September, we've had some informal discussions with the council. In essence, without them saying, they've admitted that their processes and what they did back in 2023 was incorrect. They now come back to us and said, well, yes, we want to legalise us because they think we're occupying the site illegally with a 1-year licence, but they want to take some of the land back for themselves. That's marked the pieces in yellow. None of this is agreed yet. They also, their motivation seems to be financial. They are, for our 1-year licence, the ground rent they're proposing is somewhat preposterous.
Could you be wrapping up now, please?
Yeah, and their idea is that by giving us a 1-year licence, this gives them the time to then go through the proper process, which they didn't do originally, and that is to recognise the ACV and then potentially go through the correct S123 process for the disposal of open space. We still remain effectively in limbo, but operating the site very successfully.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And if anybody wants to ask a question, please do put up a virtual hand and we'll come when we've heard our other presentation to an opportunity for discussion. But thank you very much for giving us that introduction and those tips along the way of what you found particularly helpful. So I'd like to invite Aisha now from the Barkingside Sports campaign to give us an introduction to the campaign that they're running.
Thank you very much. John, will you be helping with the slides, please?
I will indeed, and I'm just bringing them up for you.
Thank you so much. While you do that, it's great to see some familiar faces. I can see that Chris Nutt is on the call. We've also got Councillor Ruth Clark, which is great. And thank you so much, Anna, for joining the call. So we are Rill and Leaf Residents Association. We are a local residence that was informally set up in 2015 when the sports field came up for sale by the Methodist Church. Prior to May 2024, There were some members who remained active and they reported issues on the sports field to the council as and when they arose. More recently, having received very little information about the major proposed development on the sports field, in May last year, we came together and became a formidable force and have certainly given Redbridge Council some questions and raised our cause for concern. We are a proud multicultural coexisting community. We care very much about where we live, including the local sports ground, which was a very popular social hub, but is now a wonderful wildlife and biodiversity site, which is obviously at risk now of being lost to major development, and is also against the local and national planning policies, which I'm going to touch on a little later. Could we have slide 2, please? I think I've sort of covered that one, so maybe slide 3. So just to give you a little bit more history about the sports field, it was, I think, a sports field from 1921, but further back it was agricultural land, so it's never been developed on. It offered a wide range of sports, including bowling, tennis, football and cricket. And some residents whose private gardens directly border the sports field have gates that they can use to actually enter the land. And there was a sort of informal license which allowed local residents to sort of go onto the land and watch sport as and when they had football matches or cricket matches on. So it was a very popular social hub. The current landowner purchased it in around 2015 or 16, and he assured the church and the groundsman who look after the grounds that it would continue to be used as a sports field for the local community. But of course, he had no intention of allowing it to be used, and essentially just land banked it until recently when they've submitted the major planning application. In terms of sort of demand of playing pitches, there is a huge demand for playing pitches in Redbridge in general. Particularly, there is a demand for cricket, I'd say. There is a large South Asian community within Redbridge, and as you may know, the South Asian community are mad about cricket. So it is an ideal location for junior and softball cricket. The planning policies that protect the land there's so many, but I will try and do a very quick breakdown of what they are. So within our development plan, there is the health and well-being planning policy, open space, climate change mitigation, water and flood risk, high quality design, sustainable design and construction, historic trees, allotment and local produce, green infrastructure, protecting trees and enhancing landscape, nature conservation and biodiversity. There's also the National Planning Policy Framework, which I'm sure many of you have come across. You may be aware that sustainable development is referenced in that policy, and as an excerpt of that policy states, at a very high level, the objective of sustainable development can be summarized as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And it then goes on to talk about achieving sustainable development, meaning that it has to meet 3 overarching objectives, namely economic, social, and environmental. We consider that the proposed scheme has the potential to meet all 3 objectives, and a good planning authority would have advised the applicant of the same. But sadly, in our case, the Regeneration and Culture Directorate of Redbridge have, in our view, acted in the developer's best interest by facilitating an overdevelopment and really put the financial viability for the developer at the forefront of the application. while disregarding the council's duty of care to the residents of Redbridge. So I think I'm not able to show you the actual site with the I think there is a slide that touches on the site, but you'll be able to see that through our FOI requests, we've seen a lot of information that would suggest that policy advice has essentially been ignored. So we've also gone down the legal route, and we are gearing up to challenging the local authority if they approve this.
It's about 5 minutes now, Aisha, please.
Thanks, Ian. Just the next slide, please. So John asked me to sort of touch on what campaign tactics we used. So initially, I set up an online petition. We also set up an X account, and it's all very organic. So it wasn't something that we'd done before. So we're kind of learning as we are on the job, if you like. We have contacted local newspapers. It was interesting to hear Bilonians actually contacted a firm. So it's something that maybe we will explore. We have submitted many FOI requests, which have revealed a whole plethora of issues with the application. So again, we question how Redbridge has allowed this to get to the stage that it is. We also submitted an application for an asset of community value. I think previously members had contacted the council and raised issues, but sadly, nobody advised them about the asset of community value application process. So it's something that they weren't aware of. And I think really that's, again, something Redbridge could have advised them of. We've lobbied ward councillors. We've also lobbied our MP, Wes Streeting, who supports our objection and has submitted an objection to this. We've lobbied a local cricket club, the Sport England, which Chris Nutt, I must say, was very helpful and instrumental in putting me in touch with these people. So thanks for that, Chris. We have also researched the local plan, the National Planning Framework and London Plan, and we've contacted voluntary organisations. Could I have the next slide, please? So I'd be very grateful if you could take some time to follow us on X, sign our online petition, donate whatever you can, no matter how big or small. And if there is anybody that you know that you can put us in touch with that are influential, I'd be very grateful if you could do that. And finally, there is a questions slide, but I think Ian mentioned that you'll be taking questions at the end anyway. So that is the site. And I would just like to point out that the yellow space that has been, the boundary that's been on the top right-hand corner, that is the amount of open space that the developer is proposing to offer as part of the development.
Aisha, thank you. Thank you very much. And John, if we can stop the presentation and then let's just have a look if we've got. Right, I've got a first hand up from Ed, I think.
Apologies, I was just applauding Aisha's talk.
Oh, well,
thank you.
Well, that's good.
I could ask a brief question.
Yes, if you would.
Aisha mentioned challenging the council, and it's such an amazing campaign you guys are running out there. Well done. Would that be a challenge of the planning decision? And without maybe going into lots of legal details, but I'd just be interested if that's roughly how it would pan out, assuming that's something you're happy to share in a public forum.
Thanks for your question, Ed. So we are waiting at the moment. The decision hasn't been determined. So we are waiting for the recommendation report, but there are so many facets to this case, which I don't have enough time to really run through, but there are some question marks about process. And I was interested to hear Bilonians talk. They mentioned about having spotted some illegal process that the council had followed. incorrect process, so which they had admitted in discussions. There are some question marks over how the council has dealt with our application, and we have sent countless emails to the regeneration department. We've got 2 live ICO complaints in which have been accepted and are now under investigation. The council, particularly the Regeneration and Culture Directorate, I mean, we feel like things have changed since 2023 when they had a change in personnel, and there's contradictory advice. So there is advice that's very clear stating that in order for this to be acceptable, there needs to be, you know, a 50% meaningful open space given back for the community benefit. And of course, I've just shown in the last slide, they've literally just given us a postage stamp, and that's located right outside a huge block of flats, completely not keeping in with the character of the area. There's also a park that is directly adjacent to the site, so it will impact park users' use of the park. So there's lots of issues, lots.
We've got one other question which has been posted from Dan in the chat, which is about the ACV process and how you found it so far. So Aisha, do you want to comment first, and then we'll come on to our other speaker
Yes.
who also mentioned that.
So I think an asset of community value process was fairly straightforward, but I must again just commend Chris Nutt for his help with that, because you have to have a constitution with, I think it's a minimum of 16 members. So you have to attach that with your application. The application is pretty straightforward. It sort of asks for background, why it's the site is, you know, valuable to the local community, and if there is any sort of prospect of it being used for the community's use in the future. I must say that decision was made rejecting our application. The decisions, again, I didn't agree with them, but we wanted to focus on the planning issue rather than the asset of community value. But I think the only tricky part is making sure that you've got your constitution and you've got enough members to support the application.
Thank you, that's helpful. And Belonians, you mentioned asset
Yes,
of
so the
community value as well.
Yeah, the ACV was taken out quite a long time ago. It was taken out by the Save Oakfield Society for the whole of Oakfield. So that includes the Sports Centre, Old Parkonians and Jack Carter Pavilion Belonians. So, and that obviously Chris Nutt did lead that, where the organisation has a constitution, and obviously the clubs there are actively using the playing field. We really, in this case, I believe Chris can always correct me that they couldn't really say no.
Okay, thank you. Chris, do you want to just come in and comment, since you've had an honourable mention in both of those cases?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I can't see myself. Yes, we went over the top really when we made the application for application community value. But actually, it went through, as Andy has said, in such a way that you can demonstrate that because of the number of members we had and the value that they place on the site, it should be fairly automatic. And therefore, I was very surprised that this didn't happen with Aisha's site. But I do recommend it because it provides some extra protection so that it makes the council think twice before they start drawing up their plans.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you to both of our speakers, including the sort of practical tips that you've given us about the things that you found especially helpful. So we're going to move on now to the second part of our agenda, which is some updates from our staff team and an update on Wimbledon. So John, I think we're coming to you first, just on the Greenbelt review.
Yes, thank you, Ian. And just wanted to say how wonderful it is to see the two campaigns that spoke, helping one another and interacting and sharing their knowledge. And that's something we definitely want the Green Defenders Network to do on a consistent basis, and hopefully these seminars help, and we'll be doing follow-up emails as well and sharing these resources. So that's great. We're also hoping to put together some advice for local campaigners about how to campaign and use the law and public campaigning to protect your site. So we'll be possibly consulting on those documents with you all at a future meeting, or sharing them with you certainly when they're ready. Two things to update you on. Firstly, the Greenbelt review. The Mayor has announced a London-wide review of the Greenbelt to take place later this year. Obviously, that's a very significant move, something he's resisted in the past, but we feel there may be two reasons for this. One is that he might want to try and protect the Greenbelt to some extent with this review by showing that a lot of it is needed and it's very much fulfilling its purposes, and try and prevent any, in his words, a Wild West happening where people who own, developers who own Greenbelt are going to be putting forward large amounts for development because of the government's plans to build on it and designate grey belt sites. So it could be a positive move, but also we have concerns that this will cause more sites in the Greenbelt to be coming up and allocated for development. So we'll wait and see how that review goes. And there may be positives, there may be negatives. The second thing I wanted to share with you, which is very good news and just happened this week, perhaps it happened yesterday, and we have a lot of stories about things coming under threat and problems and worries with green space. But down in Charlton, they had an animal park, the Marion Wilson Animal Park, that came under threat from Greenwich budget cuts. But we've had a coordinated campaign by the locals there, a petition of over 11,000, and a public meeting has resulted in Greenwich backing down and promising to protect the park for the future. So very good example of public campaigning causing, in the face of budget cuts from a local council, forcing a change of hands. So we're delighted to hear that. And that's my update. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, John. Good to have a bit of good news there. Right. Alice, you're going to give us an update. We had one of our previous sessions focused on the commercialisation of parks, and you're going to give us a bit of an update there.
Hi, yes, and thanks. Thanks. So building on what John said, so we're going to be continuing with the Green Defenders Network, obviously. Previously, we've focused on playing fields in particular because we know that there's a big risk there. Historically, we've lost so many, and trying to get underneath why that is. But of course, we've already done a load of work around our 10 New Parks project, which is trying to bring sites which have been left to neglect and dereliction, fenced off, a lot of which are playing fields or were, back into use. So we're still working on that. We're identifying, trying to get out there and identify more where they are. We don't believe we know all of them yet. And trying to, work to bring those back into use and to kind of reduce the threat level there, because of course the longer they're left, the bigger the red flag gets, I suppose. At the same time, we've made contact with London Sport, or the Sport London, who are looking at playing pitches across London and issues that are underlying the threats to those playing fields and why playing fields are coming under such threat. And part of that is to do with the kind of lack of coordinated strategy for sport across London and for pitches across London. And we'll certainly be coming back to many of you in this room today to try to do a bit more work in that, especially around the London plan, which is, so could just hold on one moment. Sorry. So trying to talk about why we need a strategy for playing fields across London, why it is that it's sports hubs like Bealonians in particular, like Oakfield in particular, are spectacularly important for London, and why on earth they're coming under threat in any way is absolutely unacceptable. So trying to work on that, and then what we're also going to do is run a project which I'm calling, as a working title, is Parks for Sale, which is basically about trying to raise the profile of the various ways in which financial pressures and commercialisation are bringing threats to parks. And one of those is parks being sold off completely, so disposed of, as we sometimes say, by councils. One is that they are being commercialised through events, large-scale events on parks, which are inappropriate, which take the park away from park users for very long periods of time. And then finally, where, you know, what we're starting to see with the Bealonians case, which is basically the council asking for so much money that they are effectively undermining local community sports provision. So that whole gambit of kind of commercialisation, I'm kind of putting under a title of Parks for Sale, if you like, and with a view to trying to raise the profile of this problem nationally, actually, not just within London, and then finding ways to do something about it. So yeah, that's the update from me, and kind of watch this space.
Thank you, Alice. We've had a mention in the chat of requests to see presentations, and we do keep a record of the meetings. We've got the videos and presentations will be posted to the Green Defenders part of our website, so anybody will be able to see those at a later date. Can I just remind you, if you want to share any messages or concerns or tell us about a campaign you're involved with, please do type into the chat, and I'll invite you to do that. In the meantime, let's get an update on Wimbledon Park. Christopher Coombs, I think we've got you on the line.
Hello, everybody. Can you all hear? I hope this comes through clearly. Thank you.
Yes.
This is a really quick update without any slides or other materials. There's been quite a lot going on, and if we were to say we've been with CPRE in this journey for 4 years, you'll know how enthusiastic we all are. Quick recap: the All England applied to treble the size of their tennis complex by developing a very heavily protected former golf course with a huge stadium the size of the Albert Hall, and 38 other courts and about a dozen buildings. It's protected, it's green belt, it's grade 2 star listed, and so forth. We've been around the houses with the All England. I was very glad to see in the list of participants that a chap called Andy Wayrow, whom I believe works for the All England, is on this. And so, Andy, if some of my comments are addressed to you, I hope you'll be able to take them back to your team. We've had enormous support from CPRE. And actually, what's really nice about this group is none of us are NIMBYs. You might have said the same about Alan Bates and each postmaster or mistress when you were looking at that ITV programme a year ago. We're all interested in our local spaces. Where we've got to right now, the first planning application made July 2021, there have been 3 further attempts to get it right with 3 further bundles of documents from the All England. It eventually went to the GLA in September last year, and sadly they gave its consent. We've found various legal problems in that opinion, that officer's report and the consent, and we owe it to the 22,000 petitioners and everybody else who has taken a keen interest in protecting Greenbelt all around London to have a very careful look at it. So we thought we ought to embark on judicial review of the consent. One of our key points was that the land used to be held by Merton Borough Council on a public trust under section 123, a public trust which people have mentioned already, I think at Redbridge, where section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972 applies. We, after much research, discovered that the way in which the trust had been handled by Merton had not cancelled out the trust, and a Supreme Court decision in September 2023, March 2023, really changed the whole basis on which all local authorities should be looking at their land holdings. And we discovered that when Merton sold it to the All England, they had failed to cancel out the trust. We put that as one of our grounds for judicial review, and we were very glad to know that some time after we told them about the trust, the All England now realise that despite having got planning, a Section 106 signed all ready to go, they need now to apply to court to ask the court whether the trust applies and how it works. We would love not to have to go to court, but we're ready for it. Most people, when they start litigation, actually have a chat with the other side and try to resolve situations, try to, get to the heart of it. And Andy, if you're listening, I would extend that invitation again. I've tried to write to your chairman, your chief executive, but sadly without response. We really feel that this is not something on which all the lawyers who are rubbing their hands of millions, frankly, which could be spent on legal work, when there should be a conversation with the community. It's kind of sub judice right now, so I can tell you a little bit more about the legal aspects if you like. But as Lord Denning said, be you never so high, the law is always above you. And when you think that the All England gave us restrictive covenants never to develop this land in 1993, and have now said, oh, that's past history, you'll understand why people in the area and across London should be so upset that big sport is trying to run roughshod. The All England is a private members club. All the other Grand Slam tournaments are in fact owned by their national bodies. So there we are. I'd be very happy to take any questions. I'm a retired lawyer myself, but and so desperately interested in some of the legal aspects, as you can understand. And we have been massively supported pro bono by 2 KCs and Russell Cook, a firm of solicitors. So we don't underestimate the David and Goliath situation in which we find ourselves. That's, I'm afraid, inevitable in this sort of case. But there's only one way to resolve these things, and it's actually by talking. Thank you.
Thank you. We had a post in the chat from Richard Fox on Wandsworth Common, just commenting around some of the pressures that are building up around concerns on commercialisation, in that case of Wandsworth Common. Richard, do you want to just say something briefly about your comment?
Yes, I think we hope that the sort of the strap line to this would be that, public pressure can cause councils to think again. So Wandsworth has been awarded London Borough of Culture 2025, which everybody's very happy about. And of course, the council want to mark this in many ways, but including putting on, events that everybody can enjoy. And we were sort of first alerted to this about a year ago, and we discussed the sort of events that might be appropriate for Wandsworth Common. Sorry, I represent Friends of Wandsworth Common, and there's also we've got the Wandsworth Common MAC who are also represented on this call. We've both worked very closely together on this. So anyway, we assumed that our sort of preference for small scale, family friendly, appropriate scale events had been heard. So we were shocked when we discovered with very little notice that in fact what was proposed was much bigger events, which of the size which had never been held before. So we're talking 10,000 up to 10,000 people, not necessarily this year, but with an ambition to gradually gear up to that. And I think we and the MAC and as it happens, most other people who saw this proposal, thought it was completely, out of line with what was appropriate. So the interesting aspect of this is that the application was for a premises license on a green space, which happens to be, common land. So there's some interesting legal issues there, which we haven't really had to get into very much. So what we did, we have a membership of getting on for 900 now, and we've got lots of other, mailing lists and contacts and social media. So we basically, when something like this happens, we always say, look, the important thing is to make your views known. And, there was a way of formally making comments to the licensing authority. And we don't know how many people did that, but clearly a lot of people. I mean, local WhatsApp groups, which have proved to be a very powerful mechanism for communicating. Local WhatsApp groups and certainly our email inbox were just buzzing with people outraged at what was being proposed. And so we can only assume that the licensing authority was flooded with complaints. And as a result, within the space of a week of these application notices being posted up on the Common, we got a message last Friday from the council saying that the application was going to be withdrawn. So, everybody breathes a sigh of relief. Now, of course, what we don't know is what happens next. I mean, clearly the council will still want to have some events. We just hope that we will have a much more influence over what sort of events take place going forward and over what sort of period. Because the interesting thing about this premises application, I mean, and one thing that we found ourselves asking was, a green space is not a premises, but we've been led to believe that that's the only way you can actually get a license for outdoor events over a certain amount of a certain number. So at the moment, they can only have events up to 499 people, and they wanted to go higher than that. So anyway, there's also, we actually learnt quite a lot from our neighbours on Clapham Common, where that's in Lambeth rather than Wandsworth, and they said that if the council really do want to do this, then they have to apply to the Secretary of State, because it's common land, for permission to basically fence off bits of the common for multiple days. So that was another interesting aspect which we hadn't had to look into yet. But anyway, so good news as far as it goes, but we're still, as I say, waiting to see what the council and the managers of the common, who it's contracted out to an organisation called Enable, we're waiting to see what they come back and tell us what they think. Anyway, so there you go. That's
Thank
the story.
you. Thanks, Richard, and good to hear that campaigning can have a positive impact. So on the chat, we've just had a bit of there was a question about the development at Whitewebs Park and Tottenham, which was subject to a previous presentation in one of our network meetings, and if anybody's interested in finding out more about that, you can look back at our records, and similarly mentions of other concerns on the topic that Alice has called parks for sale. So we'll be in touch with those people around that campaign if you're not already in contact with us. So just as we draw matters to a close, we're interested in hearing from other people who'd like to do talks at our next session. We'll post the CPRE email address into the chat, and you can contact us afterwards just to let us know if you're interested in doing a specific consultation.
I wonder if I might just add in
yes, please.
What's going on with Whitewebs. So Whitewebs Park in Enfield is under threat from it being sold to Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. Oh, Sean, hi. And just to say, so Sean, you're on mute, just to say that that it's waiting to go to committee. So there's not much else to update on that, unless Sean, you have anything?
Yes, there are two things going on at the moment. We've got the local plan discussions going on at the moment with the planning inspector. Yesterday, I attended that, and because the main topic was Greenbelt, and I was given the opportunity to make some points about. You had to make them general. You couldn't make them specific, but it was fairly obvious. So that was certainly something that if there is a local plan coming up, it's very hard work, but to get involved with that and make your points and understand what's going on there and make representations to the planning inspector. The other thing is that we've got the planning committee coming up. It's been postponed several times, and it may even be that they could postpone it again in the light of what's been happening at the local plan inquiry. We're told that it might happen on the 11th of February, and we're prepared for that. So many objections that have come in. We're given very little time at planning committee meetings, 5 minutes per group that want to make any sort of objection. So it's important to be organised for that, so the best use can be made of time. And the council does not allow groups that are associated with one another to have separate 5-minute sessions. You have to have distinct groups, otherwise you end up 3 or 4 of you can end up trying to share a 5-minute session. But we're negotiating on that. We've got support from ward councillors who will be able to make representations. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to say what we're going to complain about, because the moment we send in any objections, it's passed straight over to Tottenham Hotspur, I believe, and they then bring out yet another revision of their plan dealing with the objections. And I get very annoyed when I hear ministers, as I did this morning, telling us how the whole planning system is geared against developers and the big money boys, because that's not what it feels like from my end.
No.
The one general point is, I know this is things that many have said and that Alice has put forward. I think we have got to have pressure, general pressure on protection of parks and aimed at government, because there is no real protection in law for parks. And that's something we should really be concentrating on.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks for the update. And for everybody, keep fighting your campaigns and learning from each other. At CPRE, we will do what we can to support you. So thank you, everybody, for your contributions and your questions. Please let us know. You've got the email address posted there from John if you'd like to talk at our April meeting. That's when we'll be aiming to have our next Green Defenders meeting. And we hope for another great turnout. We'll confirm the date in due course. Thank you, everyone.